Welcome to Series 7 of the Dig podcast, and I am your host, Caroline O'Neill. In this series, I am talking to business owners, entrepreneurs and experts who are sharing their journey and preparing us for the future. What does the working world look like in the future? It changes every week, every day, every hour. So tune in each week as I ask my guests how they are future-proofing their business. How to scale your business. Do you know what that means? I have to admit, I've been a little unsure recently when I was considering this person for the podcast. I was like, do I really know what this is, scaling? And I've had a good conversation with my guest before we went on air, and I understand it a lot more and realise I need to know a lot more about it. So today on the podcast, I am speaking to Brendan McGurgan. And when you read anything about Brendan online, it mostly comes with the headline, inspiring, connecting and enabling ambitious leaders of small to medium enterprises to scale with purpose. I was like, wow, what does that mean? I was intrigued. So I started to follow Brendan on LinkedIn probably about a year ago. And I've been watching all the things he's doing, and he has his own podcast as well, ScaleX Insider. And it's unbelievable, but you're going to hear all about it. But just to give you a little idea, he was Group Managing Director and Finance Director at CDE Global for 17 years, which has, and Brendan will correct me if I'm wrong in any of these figures, currently 700 staff and a revenue of 100 million. That could be different by the time we check in after my introduction. But Brendan was part of that for 17 years. So the knowledge and the expertise that he has led him to do what he does now. He's the founder and director of Simply Scaling, co-author of the Amazon bestseller Simple Scaling, regular keynote speaker and host, as I said, of ScaleX Insider podcast. So he's coached businesses from all over Ireland and the UK and the world, and he helps them scale their business and reach heights they could only have dreamed of. Like, we all have our dreams about how big our business can be, but are we really doing the things that are needed to get us there? That's the question. He says that clients have ambition to scale but are stuck, falling out of love with their business, lack the belief in themselves and the know-how to scale. Then that's where he can step in. So I was having a look online, and you're going to get to hear from him really soon, but I had a look online what other people were saying about the work that he does. So there is a great testimonial from Gareth Morrison, who's CEO of Lava Group. He said what Brendan does is life-changing. It's going to challenge you in every way and push you to really grow yourself and your team. And then Patrick Woods, who's the managing director of Linwood, says that he would definitely recommend the programme that Brendan does to second generation leaders who are working alongside the founders. And that's definitely a big culture here, you know, of passing down generations, family, businesses. And it's been invaluable to helping him. So I want to know what it is. I'm like, what does he do? So thankfully, Brendan has agreed to be on the podcast today. Thank you for being on the Dig podcast, Brendan. Was that all right?
That was really impressive.
I was doing my research.
That's the most thorough introduction I've ever had. So well done.
Well, I'm intrigued by you and everything. Like 17 years to be in one place and then to transition and evolve. That's a big thing in itself, never mind what you've done. So your time at CDE Global obviously led you then to do what you do. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, absolutely. I spent 17 years there, went in my late 20s, left in my early 40s. So not only did the business evolve, but I certainly evolved. I like to think I evolved in the course of that time. Now I became married, I had children, and all of that brings a new sense of personal development, personal challenge, as well as what we were doing within the business. So, I mean, the business, 17 years, it seemed, God, imagine staying in one place for 17 years, but every year it felt like a different business, because what I came to know of our own journey, we were scaling, but scaling only came into the business language actually probably 8, 9, 10 years ago. Scaling wasn't a thing whenever we were actually growing the business.
What is it, Brendan? So just to let you know, on the Dig podcast, I always ask what I know they're all thinking. So everybody online are like, what's scaling in comparison to growth? Tell us in layman terms.
It's a brilliant question, because a lot of times people use them interchangeably, think they're the same thing. Growing is doing more with more. So let's say I want to increase my revenue by £100,000. I recruit 2 people that cost me £50,000 each. Well, I haven't really done anything to the bottom line. Scaling is doing more with leverage. So what do I mean by that? It's actually increasing the bottom line by the £100,000, but actually instead of recruiting 2 people, I actually recruit 1 person, and I, at £50,000, and I implement a process that's going to cost me £20,000, and I've now added £30,000 to the bottom line. So it's growing is doing more with more, scaling is doing more with leverage. Now, technically, it's, per an OECD definition, it's average annualized growth of 20% year on year. It's measured over a 3-year period, and it's measured by either revenue growth or employee growth. That's the technical definition, but you can kind of shell that.
Well, it's good to hear that too, though. But then when you try to translate that for us to understand, it is what you said at the start. I would say that a lot of businesses, I know you work with, quite large businesses. Isn't that right when it comes to turnover and stuff?
Well, the minimum level in terms of the program is £1 million revenue and a team of 10 to 15 people, right up to 35, 40 million pounds revenue with hundreds of people. But they all fall within the definition of SMEs, small and medium-sized enterprise. And again, there's a definition for what a small or medium-sized enterprise is, and it's typically a revenue number and an employee number or a balance sheet number as well. So businesses less than 10 people are considered micro businesses.
Okay.
Over 10 people with £1 million revenue are considered small businesses, and then up to 40 million, I think it's 40 million pounds revenue, it's a medium-sized business, and then large businesses over that. Okay,
so there's definitely, just to give you an idea, a variation that are listening to the Dig podcast. I would say probably 60% the micro.
Right.
And the rest small to medium enterprise. Okay. So there's something for everybody here. And I suppose don't get, I'm talking to the listener now, don't get discouraged that this isn't for you, because actually the principles are the same across most businesses, aren't they, for the scaling, for some of the things we're going to talk about, like purpose and vision and all of that. Something that Brenton's really good at actually is you speak and then you stop. Did I ever tell you that?
No.
So whenever you're talking, then you make your point and then you stop. I have a problem where I would keep talking, but I'm trying to learn from you. You're really good at that. So you're allowing me to actually explain what I'm thinking too. So scaling, we now know the definition, but me and you when we were prepping for the podcast, you said a thing to me about businesses would come to you and sometimes they're like a slave to their business. And I can resonate with that just from my background in retail. But what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so often people leave a previous job because they want freedom, they want independence, and potentially inspired to actually do what they've done in a previous job, but do it for themselves and do it better. And in the early stages of growing a business, let's say, or setting up a business in that startup phase, it tends to be scrappy. You're hustling, you're doing a lot of the things yourself. You're out delivering whatever it is during the day. In the evening, maybe you've bought Zero for 100 quid and you're putting invoices onto the system to get them out. And so that's kind of the early scrappy days. The challenge when it comes to scaling is you cannot scale a business if you are doing all of those things. But for the years that people do that, it becomes habitual. And as the business gets bigger, they do more and more of that. They're all of a sudden now the independence and freedom that they wanted, to have a 4-day week and head off on a Friday with their partner or whatever. Now they're working Fridays and they're working Saturdays and they're maybe sticking on invoices on a Sunday afternoon, and they can't see a way out of that. The company's getting bigger. They're doing more and more activities and it becomes habitual. They really struggle to actually make the investment to bring people in, hire people to delegate those things away, and actually then step up themselves to actually do what they're really good at. So they get caught. We talk about getting caught in the bowels of the business because for years they've been scrappy, they've been hustling, they've been kind of resourceful. And what has been really useful for them in those early stages, they become the fire starter to create something, and then they just choke this out, or they become the arsonist. By doing more and more, they just throw fuel onto this, and this thing just engulfs them in many respects. It becomes something that is energy depleting, life sucking, soul sapping, and they're just caught.
The Dig podcast needs your help Did you know that we have thousands of people download the podcast each week, but still people haven't subscribed or followed on the channel? So I'm asking you, if you listen on Apple or Spotify, if you could hit follow. If you listen on YouTube, then hit that subscribe button. It means that I can reach out to even more guests, bring even more actionable advice that can help you in your business. Oh my God, everybody listening are going to be like, like there's so much, although, and I know I'm laughing about that, but there is so much of that people are going to resonate with, because you do become that without really wanting to. Like I listen to you and I'm like, oh my God, that's me, he's describing me. But I'd say I'm not the only one and there's people listening. So can we save ourselves? So you have your principles of scaling, and we're not going to talk through them all, but let's just take us from at the start. Where do you start, Brendan?
Well, the very first principle of scaling, there's 10 principles, and the origin of these principles, if we just give a little bit of colour to the principles, whenever I became CEO of CDE back in 2007, very proud to be CEO, but there was no roadmap, there was no guide to how you actually scale a business. So, I didn't go to scaling school. You don't, and in many respects, very few ever learn to be a CEO. They become a pseudo CEO by de facto because they've actually founded this business, and all of a sudden they find that they're actually, they have a passion for the product, but 2 years later they're managing people, they're managing customers, they're dealing with suppliers, all of these things that they hadn't perceived at the outset of actually setting this business up. For me, the principles came out of a desire to actually create a roadmap for businesses who want to scale. And to add a little bit into there, less than 1% small and medium-sized enterprise ever achieve scale. And that's really, really sad.
That is scary fact. That's a scary statistic, actually.
Less than 1%. So, can we save ourselves? Absolutely. But first of all, it requires, the very first principle is psyche. So they're all P's. It's a 10 principle framework. The first principle is psyche. And it's actually becoming more self-aware that actually what I'm doing is not adding value to the business anymore. It's not adding value to my life, and it's not adding value to the business. I'm just doing this stuff because it's what I've always done. And we have this paradigm typically that, well, why would I hire somebody in to do that when I can do it myself?
I know. Is that like what your mummy and daddy taught you too? You do it yourself. That's our tradition, and especially here in this country, you work hard yourself and you do it. Is that why we are like that?
Well, absolutely. A big part of our belief system is actually created by the time we're 7. Mm-hmm. So, we're not born with any religion. We're not born with any political persuasion. We're not born, with a
desire to be an entrepreneur
or not, so depending on where you grew up. If you grew up in an entrepreneurial family, well then that will just seem natural. If you didn't, maybe you berated the local business person who was an entrepreneur, and or there was a saying in the house where money's the root of all evil, and you associate money with actually being in business. So actually you've got this limiting belief that you're not even aware of in the first instance as to you come to a block every time you reach a certain threshold in your business, and you think it's to do with the economy or interest rates or inflation or customers, but actually you're putting this block on yourself because it goes back to something that was a belief that you inherited whenever you were younger. And a lot of our beliefs come from our parents, come from our schooling, come from the society we live in. Like we could talk about beliefs all day. Take the Northern Irish.
Yeah, you told me this on the phone. I was laughing. Tell us that one.
The not too bad disease. Mm-hmm. If you ask anyone within Northern Ireland how they are, they'll go not too bad, and it's a double negative. It means like I'm bad, but today I'm not too bad. We rarely say good or great because again we grew up in a society where you weren't allowed to be perceived to others that things were going well, because maybe you were getting above your station was another great one. Don't be getting above your station. Who do you think you are? So all of these things factor into our belief system, which ultimately over time becomes our personality, which then dictates actually our behaviours. And so this is why the first principle is psyche. It's the mindset of the leader. And this isn't just me saying this anecdotally. the research and the latest research from the Scale Up Institute cites lack of ambition of the leader as the single greatest impediment as to why companies don't scale. Now, when you unpack lack of ambition, really what it is unchallenged limiting beliefs.
Okay.
So going back to your point, Caroline, and we grew up in a society where we go, well, why would you pay a man to do that when you can do it yourself?
Sound like my daddy when you said that.
But that's what we grew up with. So that's ingrained. So actually for you to physically engage with somebody to do something that you know you can do, but in a scaling business, the best that you'll ever be in that is average. So, if you're putting invoices on a Sunday evening and you're not a qualified accountant, the best you'll ever be is average. So just recruit somebody in who does this day in, day out, and it's their unique strength, it's their unique ability. And you then concentrate on what makes you unique and ultimately what lights you up. So from a psyche perspective, what we want is people to be ruthless to actually interrogate. Take a really practical example. If I say to the listeners, over the next 2 weeks, take an inventory of everything you do. So, and I mean everything, from you waking up in the morning to you go to bed at night, and categorize those things as either you're incompetent at it, you're competent, so you're competent at putting invoices on, or you're excellent. And what I challenge the listeners to do in small and medium-sized businesses is delegate away 20% of the things that fall in the incompetent category or the competent, and that they continue to focus on the things that they're excellent at, because those are the things that actually created value in this business in the first instance.
Just going to let that sit there for a wee minute. So this podcast is absolutely about you, but when you're talking to me, I feel like I needed you in my life years ago. So I used to have a shop, and this is a story that's exactly what you just told. And this is probably why, well, COVID happened, but why I don't have a shop anymore. I needed a dressmaker to turn up the trousers.
Right.
For the little boys for their occasion wear, right? And I convinced myself that I did not need to pay £6 per trouser,
right,
that I could teach myself how to use a sewing machine. This is a true bill.
Yeah.
My daddy said, now you'll not be buying a sewing machine. Your granny had one that she had. Yep. Now my granny, God rest her, passed away 30 years ago. You can imagine the sewing machine. You could take that and you could learn yourself how to. I took that sewing machine. I went to a women's group in Cookstown. I couldn't even carry it in out of the car because it was that heavy.
Yeah.
Cried because I don't know how. I never could do home economics. Don't know how to use a sewing machine. And I look back on that now, and that was because I was thinking, why would I pay a dressmaker?
Right.
But I actually was better with customers. I could make sales all day long. What was I doing, Brendan? What everybody else probably, in certain ways doing.
Look at your energy and your body language whenever you talked about customers. You absolutely lit up. It was expressive.
I know.
And when you talked about the sewing machine, you were fine, you were humped over. And this is the challenge, because ultimately, when you're energized about the things that you're brilliant at and about what really brings value to the business, then you will want to naturally do more of it. You will want to do more of it. You will want not only one shop, you'll want 3 shops, because you're doing that thing you absolutely love doing. Now, when you start to contemplate that, oh God, and I've got to turn up all these trousers, and you're home in the evenings and you're in that crap form and you're having to sit at the sewing machine, you're doing this stuff, and George wondering why you have a scar on your face. The kids can't.
I must talk about Jared a lot. Do you remember? You remember his name?
And the kids are coming up to you and you're scowling, and you're hating this, and you're going into the business tired the next day. You're doing something you hate. Then your energy for the business starts to deplete, and you get sucked. You get wrapped up in the, well, I have to do the turn-ups. I have to turn the trousers up. Whenever there's actually a Google database full of dressmakers who you could have contacted, who would like to say, oh, I'd love to do that. Let me come in every Wednesday afternoon. I'll collect the trousers and I leave them back to you next Tuesday. And now, if you're going to give me, business every week, should we contract on a really good rate that allows you to, to do this competitively? And now all of a sudden, this dressmaker is absolutely delighted because they're getting the business and they're getting to do what they are brilliant at. You don't have to do it because you're getting to do what you're brilliant at. You've now more time to engage with more customers, and you're delighted if somebody comes in and needs their trousers turned up because you know I've got somebody who's going to do that. Does that make sense?
Crystal clear, 100%. I feel so. I'm embarrassed. I want to tell it because I've learned a lot, but I mean, I'm embarrassed to believe that I thought that way, and still in my new business that I'm in, I need to do that exercise. So 2 weeks, did you say? Or
take 2 weeks and catalogue everything you do.
Okay, I'm going to do that.
And I'm a big fan of acronyms, and I'm a big fan of ICE.
Don't ICE tell me to be getting into an ice bath.
So it's what you're incompetent at. So there are lots of things. We opened out this conversation before we started recording, and I host ScaleX Insider. You said, do you do all the editing? Do you do all the marketing? And my words back to you were, I only do what I love doing. So the best that I could ever be, if I started to get into YouTube now to learn how to edit a podcast, the best that I could be is average. And I don't know how many years it would take for me to study YouTube videos to be average, and how much time it would take me to do something that really I don't want to do. Now, by the time I would finish doing that, the last thing I would want to do is to actually create more podcasts. Then I'll create an excuse for myself to say, actually, the podcast isn't going that well anyway, and we'll bring it to a natural conclusion. But the fact that I've got a podcast producer, and all I have to do is have brilliant conversations. What I love doing is, number one, going out and getting world-class guests. I love that. I love the challenge of actually attracting guests. People ask me, how do you get your guests? I go, I love that part. Being able to connect with them, asking, getting rejected, asking again, rejected, asking, getting rejected, and then 3 months' time, 6 months' time, they come back and say, oh, look, I've got availability, I'll come on to your podcast. I love that. The marketing side, I do nothing, but yet we're all over TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn. I don't do any of that. Marketing person who is absolutely brilliant at what they do, takes all the content, repurposes it all. So I only do the bit that I love to do, and other people get to do the bits that they love to do.
And when you told me this before we went on, I said, now that's the dream, but it doesn't have to be a dream, sure, just when you're saying that.
Well, you see, what people create for themselves, not deliberately, nobody sets out to create a nightmare for themselves, but actually very few people take the time to stand back and actually contemplate what the dream looks like. So I've just come from a meeting with two CEOs, two co-founders of the business. It's a really successful business. And when I asked the question of, what do you want? So if you woke up on the 6th of September in 2026 and you said to me, that was the best 3 years that we've ever had in this business, why would that be so? And they really struggle with that, to actually articulate what it is they want. And what happens is people waking up, time, you and I both know time goes very quickly, people waking up 5 years time, 10 years time, and wonder why their life hasn't changed. What I always say to people, if you don't have a vision for your own future, if you don't have a dream for your own future, then at the moment you're living somebody else's dream, you're a puppet to somebody else. And nobody's waiting down those stairs for me whenever I walk out and say, Brendan, when you have 2 minutes, would you give me a little, some of your time there? Because I have this wonderful dream for your future and I'd like to communicate it to you, and I've got it all crafted out. Would you like to hear it? There's nobody doing that. We have to take agency of our own lives, of our own dreams, of the vision that we want, and then we reverse engineer from there. And then we take action today to say, well, what does the person who's living that life in 3 years' time do today? Are they still editing podcasts? Are they still, doing the marketing? Are they still turning up the trousers?
I know.
Sorry, that sounds very brutal.
No, I've actually forgotten about the podcast now. I'm like, I'm so intrigued, so I'm listening. But I know, I guess it's a journey for everybody, isn't it? Like, nobody's going to start off with that mindset that you have, I don't think, do they? Like, is there anything, do you meet people who are like this naturally?
No, because
you learn how to be this way?
Well, it starts with self-awareness.
Yeah.
It starts with you taking the time out to actually truly contemplate what life do you want to live. So, and it can start as a simple thing. Go, if I woke up in 3 years' time and I was in the same condition, let's say physically, as I am today, would I be pleased? If I woke up in 3 years' time and my mental state is the same as it is today, would I be happy? If I woke up in 3 years' time and my relationships were the same as they are today, would I be happy? If I woke up in 3 years' time and my business is exactly the same and I'm doing exactly the same things in 3 years' time, would I be happy? And that's a question I would pose to listeners to think about. And if they're happy in all those areas, well, then brilliant, don't change it. That's you've hit the holy grail. But if you're not, then well, what are you going to do today to actually take the first step towards the change? Because there's nobody else going to take that step for you. Nobody. But you've got to ask yourself, you've got to take the time to ask yourself the question. People waking up 5 years, 10 years time and wonder why their life isn't any different or why it's got worse. Because actually they haven't been deliberately intentional with actually creating the life that they want to live.
Because you can have the right mindset, but it's about action too, like you just said. You can think all you want about what you want it to be, but you need to do something.
And this is such a crucial point. You know, you can't, I enjoy it.
Imagine it. You can't imagine it's going to happen.
I do my breath work every morning. But those just condition the mind to give you the confidence to actually take the first step. And it's about taking the step. And what I found, without this sound too woo-woo, the universe is very benevolent. The universe conspires to support you whenever you take the first step. And this is another challenge with entrepreneurs, because what they typically want to see is, if there's 10 steps from here to my 3-year dream, I want to see all those 10 steps. I want to know with certainty what's going to happen at each step. And that's not realistic. But what will happen is, if you take the first step, just take the first step, the minimum viable action, the minimum viable step. If you've thought about actually this customer that you've wanted to contract with, and you're brilliant at this, you don't have any fear around connecting with people,
no.
But a lot of people do. Mm-hmm. And what I'd say is, just call them today. But you can't dream about wanting this great customer if you actually haven't taken the step to reach out to them.
So me writing on the wall, I want Brendan McGurgan on my podcast, would not have happened if I hadn't actually sent a message on LinkedIn.
Correct. I can
dream it all I want. It's true,
but I'm not like it. You write that, and that keeps that in focus. That keeps that in focus. So you're thinking about that constantly. And then my name crops up and you go, okay, I need to connect with them now. And there's something about inspiration as well. When you are inspired, it's understand that inspiration is perishable. You've got to act on it when it happens. It's not a case of, I feel really inspired after this. God, I must do this, this and this. And then you go, well, I'll do it in 6 months' time. No, act on it, because it disappears. That inspiration will disappear. So you've got to take the action. What I say is, the smallest step, just break it down into tiny, tiny, tiny bits. What is the one thing that you could do to actually inch you further towards what it is that you actually want?
Oh, I don't know if I'm fit for the rest now. I'm so thinking of my own, and I don't mean to be selfish, but I'm thinking of my own situation. I'm sure everybody's listening, thinking of their own situation and what they're going to do. But that's about the psyche and the mindset, Brendan, and that's number one, first and foremost.
Yeah.
And once we get, and you're probably always going to be working on that, aren't you? Like,
that's a lifelong journey. You don't arrive at a point where you go, oh,
I'm ready.
I have a bulletproof mindset, bulletproof psyche, I can take on the world. That is constant. And the CEOs that I would coach, there are a number of CEOs I coach on a one-to-one basis, and I find that they will be absolutely on fire, because what they've done is built in great practices, great routines, great rituals, which have really supported what it is that they want to do. And we'll maybe have a conversation, a month later, and they say, I'm not in a good place. And they say, okay, let's go back describe to me the practices that you had in place that were making you feel good. Physical practices, maybe getting daily exercise in, ensuring your sleep was good, nutrition was good. And again, there's no rocket science to this. I talk about doing things that make good sense. Again, I use a lot of acronyms, but sense for me is sleep. You are not going to waken up after having 3 hours sleep to start crafting a wonderful dream for the future. You're going to waken up feeling very vulnerable, very tired, very irritable, so all of those things are fundamental. Sleep, exercise, daily movement. We know that if we move, we feel better. Movement is medicine. It's just, and again, I'm not revealing anything new here, but how often are you building exercise and physical movement into your practice? Nutrition, you just, it's back to what you eat. What are you putting into your body? You're building a house at the moment, Caroline. What if somebody rocked up with materials from the local dump? What would you say to them?
At my new house
to use to build.
Oh no, I wouldn't put that in my good house.
Yeah, you wouldn't put it in your good house. You wouldn't use that as the material to build your new house. You were putting crap into yourselves every day to build what is this vehicle to take us around the world, to take us through our life, and we're so and then the self-care. What do you do daily if it's only 10 minutes? That's just for you. Whether sitting down having a nice cup of coffee, reading a magazine, whatever it is. And the E of the sense acronym is environment. Environment's absolutely critical. If you're trying to create a dream, a vision for the future, and you're surrounded with people who are not necessarily inspired to develop themselves or develop their businesses or develop, their relationships, well then it's going to be very difficult for you to do the same when you're existing in that environment. So often it becomes incredibly challenging for people to develop themselves because they want to stay in the same environment. Watching the same stuff, being with the same people, staying in the same circles, doing the same things, but expecting that they're going to get a different outcome. It's going to be really, really challenging. So you've got to put yourself in the environment that has the people in it who you want to be.
That's very, very key, isn't it? Because, and that, I know at a basic level, it's like networking with purpose, isn't it? Like, I mean, as in business sense, going to the circles of the people that you maybe are inspired by or influenced by and getting into their networks and things. Am I right in saying things like that? Or
yeah, if you and I are both from the country, from villages. If you want to become a world-class podcaster, which you'll already...
Oh, come on, tell me. I want to know. We're talking about this all the time.
But you put yourself in a place where there's world-class podcasters. Because what you're doing in the context of the environment that you're in is exceptional. And because it's different, people will not necessarily understand what you're doing. Worse, they'll berate what you're doing as not adding any value. Because we see the world as we are. We don't see it as it is. So you've got to put yourself into environments where what you're doing in your existing environment is exceptional, but what you do in this environment is completely normal.
Okay. Wow. Never thought of that before. Because as, and again, I don't want this to be about me, but I feel like we're
really
I'm like, I came in here this morning and it's about sleep, first of all. So I've been planning this podcast and we're recording this last 2 days. My children started school on Monday. My wee girl starts school tomorrow. And my husband said to me on Monday night, "What's wrong with you? You're very quiet. Are you ripping with me? Are you fell out with me or something?" And I said, No, I'm just trying to figure out when I'm going to bath test because I'm feeling I'm going to cry since because I'm so busy this week with the podcast. She starts school on Thursday. I have to detangle her hair. That takes an hour and a half. I won't be home to 8 o'clock on Wednesday night. She starts and I just bust out crying. And I was like, how am I supposed to do all this? I've slept like 4 hours, and this isn't fair me, but I realize that I can't be the person I want to be if I continue like that. But I help edit the podcast, I do all the marketing, I do all the calls, I do all the show notes, I do have a team, but I'm trying to do it myself because I'm trying to economize and be a hustler. It's not going to work. It's not going to happen. It's not going to succeed. I know that, but sometimes I'm hearing you say this now, I'm like, oh my God, realization. But anyway.
Yeah, and if you only start with actually starting to delegate 20% of that, if we go back to the principles, there are two key principles to leverage. We talked about growing is doing more with more. You're trying to find more hours in the day to do more, but actually, you're not getting a return. There's no return on life in that. Never mind a return on an investment. But if we think of processes, if you only, people, if we think of people, what people will say to me in SMEs is, I can't get the people, number one, or I can't get the people that I have aren't capable of doing what I need to do. What I would challenge people to do, and the essence of this is the leaders, the founders' inability to delegate. We are control freaks. Entrepreneurs, founders, leaders are control freaks. We want our hands all over this, and we will justify not letting go because we can't get the people, or the people that we have aren't capable of doing it. Have you ever tried? And this is the second part of this is, will you say, well, once I review my, what I'm competent and excellent at, what do I do next? Well, delegate the bits the activities that you're doing that you're incompetent are only competent at.
Behind the camera are people who are fully competent to do everything we've just talked about.
Yes.
And I'm dabbled in and out of getting them to do that for me, but I'm still in the mindset of I can do this myself. So I'm a way back. I have a lot of work to do, but I do have the people, the experts, the best in the game, but I'm still trying to do it myself. There's nothing wrong there, Brendan.
Well, I'm going to challenge you to this.
Okay, right? This is my challenge.
Yes. I'm gonna invite you to ask 5 people who know you really well what you're absolutely brilliant at.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ask them that question, and also ask them what you're doing currently that you're not that good at.
Okay. And everyone that's listening could do that as well.
Absolutely.
Yes. Have you taken time off work, perhaps to care for a relative? Maybe you're juggling it all, just like me, but you're feeling like you may be ready to embrace the world of work again, but you just don't know where to start. Timely Careers can help you. It was set up in January. It's a skills training platform and a jobs platform that can help you ease yourself back into work in a flexible way that suits you. It provides training, peer support, mentoring, and so much more. It also connects you with employers that care that you get back to the work in a way that suits you. So Timely Careers is a fantastic platform. It's there for you and the employer. Don't think that you can't do this. You can with their help. So check out timelycareers.com and let them support you on your journey back to work. Because this isn't about me, even though I feel like I am talking, but I suppose it's good to hear real life examples of people that are the turning the trousers up. I'm sure there's loads of people going through this.
It's real. I can give you the theory. I can give you, we can go into the depth of the principles, but what you just described is very, very real.
Yeah, you didn't know you were getting so when you were coming to the podcast. But okay, so we talked about psyche and we've talked more than I thought we would. So I'm really sorry because I know that you're so busy and all. But for number 2, we're just going to talk about quickly purpose and vision is really important. So, and we'll talk about that and then we'll move on to another lighter topic. But purpose and vision, tell me about that.
Well, why are you doing this podcast?
Actually, I want to do the podcast because I was always the business owner that needed to know, but no one would tell me how to do things. And I am that advocate for that person that's listening right now. That's why I'm doing this.
And that's so powerful. That's your purpose.
That's my purpose.
Being being a champion and cheerleader of SMEs.
Yes.
And when you've had a tough day and you have to go into a number of recordings and you're thinking, and maybe the kids are going mad at home, George's ringing, you go, where are you? And you have to go into another recording.
Mm.
How powerful is that purpose to actually say, no, I'm going to do this, as opposed to jacking it in?
Well, it's what makes you go in to do the recording. You know you have to, because the people are depending on you to bring that to them, and that's your purpose. So yes, that's what's going to drive you. I get that.
It gives you the energy.
Yes.
That's the energy. Mm-hmm. And when you ask people why they're doing what they're doing, if you say it to me, well, for the money, why else would you do it? So, just take money as a given.
Mm-hmm.
Of course we need a value transaction. We need money in exchange for the product or services that we're providing. We need that. But let's say you've got all the money you need. Why are you doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Let's assume that. Let's assume that this scaling journey will actually give you all the money that you need. So why are you doing it? Ask that question. Why does this company exist in the first instance? That's the why. That gives you the energy. The vision then gives you direction. So there's no sense having all of this energy. Purpose without vision is just unrealized potential. It's just wasted energy. Vision gives it real direction. So now I know where I'm channeling this energy. It's this direction, not this direction. And in the context of the scaling business and purpose and vision, the second principle, they go hand in glove. The challenge back to the people that I get from businesses of a certain size that can't get the people. My question back to them is, what do great people want? Because who do we want to hire in our business?
The best.
We want to hire the best. What do the best people want?
The best leader, the person that can lead them in the best way. Am I right in saying that?
Well, ultimately, yes. They want to grow.
Yes.
Brilliant people want opportunities to grow. They want opportunities to challenge themselves, to develop, to grow, to get recognition and reward as a result of this growth journey. Now, if you don't have a vision, then those great people out there who aren't looking for jobs, by the way, because the existing business they're in or have locked them in because they're great people.
Yes.
They're not going to look at you because they can't see inside your head unless you've communicated where you want to go and the vision that you have for this business in the future. Then you're not going to attract the best people. So if you have a business at the moment and let's say it's turning over £1 million, there are brilliant people out there who will look at your business and say, I don't want to work for a business that's only turned over £1 million. Let's say you had a vision and you've turned over your £1 million after 2 years, and in 5 years' time your vision is to turn that £1 million, that £2 million into £20 million. They say, I'd love to be part of that growth journey and I could really, really help that company. Now you're attracting passive people, passive candidates who aren't looking out of where they're currently at to have a conversation, engage you in a conversation to support you in the vision that you have for the future. But if they only see £1 million and you haven't articulated where you want to go, well, then you're not going to attract the good people. And then what I hear from people who want to scale their business, I can't get the people. And I say, okay, well, let's set the people thing aside for a moment, the people challenge aside for a moment. Share with me and take the next 5 minutes and inspire me about where you want to go. Come on, inspire me.
And then how do they reach the people with that message? Is that about their presence in different arenas that they're in? Is that how do people know their vision?
How do you reach people with?
Well, I reach mine online.
That's so.
So is that okay?
Meet people where they're at.
Meet people where they're at.
Again, this comes back to psyche.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people, when they create a vision, they are fearful of actually putting that vision out there, because we come back to the Irish paradigm: fear of judgment, fear of failure. Fear of,
what other people are thinking.
What are other people thinking? That's the fear of, well, who am I to think that I could do this? All of those fears, which stops them, which means they have a vision, but they're harboring it up here in their head, and they get frustrated as hell with the people that they have, because the people that they have aren't operating to the vision that they have in their head, because the people that they have can't see the vision in their head. So they just become frustrated, and then they bring it back to, well, I can't get the people. But you've hit on a profound point that great people want to join and be inspired by great leaders who have an inspiring vision of the future. Mm. But you communicate that vision publicly.
Yes. It takes confidence.
It takes confidence, which you go back to the psyche.
It does. So that's why that's number one.
Correct.
Okay.
It all comes back. That acts as a multiplier.
Yes.
For the impact of all of the other principles.
There's a lot of work to be done on number one before you move anywhere here. And that's ongoing.
Absolutely. And our program's 1 year long. And,
is that how long it is?
And the psyche principle is worked on throughout. Because ultimately, when you get to a point, and we take leaders through the process of crafting their vision, we take them through a process which gets them emotionally engaged to that vision, where they're inspired themselves. First of all, you've got to be inspired. Of course. You've got to sell the vision. Of course. Because people out there have so much choice. The best people have so much choice. You have got to be heard over above everybody else with an inspirational vision of your future. But you've got to believe it. You don't need to know the answers, because this is the other bit, that actually the best people bring the answers.
Yes.
So you don't need to know the answers. You just need to inspire those best people to come and join you to help execute, to help build a plan and execute on this vision. So people get stuck then in this, back into the balls of the business.
And we're back to square one again then, I know. So look, this is a journey in life as well. This takes you through all the different phases of your life, and it's not something that you're just going, like your program that you do is a year, but this is lifelong.
Absolutely.
Lifelong. And it's not easy. Being in business is not easy. No. Life is not easy. No. You throw the two together, and then family mixed in. We're going to have these challenges, but it's awareness, like you talked about at the start. Yeah. Awareness that we're going through this. How can we fix it? Because we want to be the best we can be.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to the Dig podcast, listening to Scale Insider. So, yes. So at least we know there are tools out there. You have the book as well, Brendan, which we can buy on Amazon. Isn't that right?
Yeah.
And I'll link it in the show notes for anybody who's interested in getting the book. And also your program is running, and your applications are open for that at the moment, did you tell me?
Yes.
Now, let's talk about ScaleX Summit. Now, that is a vision.
Yes.
It's not a vision. Tell people about the vision. Because when people say to me, who's Brendan McGurgan that's going to be in your podcast? I'm like, well, what do you hear what he's doing now? That is a vision. And this is happening. So tell people, what is the ScaleX Summit?
Sure. And I'll go back to how that vision for the summit was created 3 years ago at the bottom of my garden.
Okay.
So that was, and once you write something down, and for me, once I put anything to paper, I'm committed to it. So I'm always very careful of what I put to paper. That process of putting it to paper holds me accountable. And then I shared it with the team, and then we have shared that publicly. But that was a vision created 3 years ago, before I had a podcast, before I had before the program was the success that it's now become, but it was part of our 3-year vivid vision. And this, everything I do, you mentioned this at the start, and you recited it very eloquently. Everything I do is to inspire, connect, and enable ambitious leaders of small and medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So you break that down, you go, well, why are companies not scaling? Outside at the start, less than 1% are actually scaling. So what's holding them back? We talked about lack of ambition. So where do you get ambition? Well, you're not going to be ambitious to scale your business if you're waking up in the morning and you jump onto the news feed on your phone, because you're not going to find inspiration in there, which comes back to the environment. So I'm being really careful what you actually put in. So feed yourself quality, and ultimately you will reap the rewards. But if you're feeding yourself rubbish, and everybody will discern what rubbish means at the end, but I'm not for one moment suggesting that
your news feeds rubbish.
Correct. But ultimately, personally, I don't watch any news, because it doesn't inspire me. So when you examine lack of ambition, how do we inspire ambition? And that was the purpose of the summit. Bring 500 people into the ICC in Belfast. They're going to be sparking and vibing off one another. They're going to be energized from one another in front of 8 world-class speakers who are going to absolutely leave them energized, buzzing by the time they come out of the ICC. People are going to feel inspired. And what I'm saying after that is act on that inspiration. Don't let it kind of wait 2, 3, 4 days, 5 weeks. You'll forget about it and you'll be back doing you'll be back to the busyness of how things were. So the summit is incredibly purposeful in terms of the format. Get world-class speakers who speak to one or more of the 10 timeless principles of scaling and inspire those 500 leaders.
And is there anyone particularly you'd like to mention that's at the ScaleX Summit? I know one that I definitely want to go in here.
Sure.
Well, he's the gold standard, when it comes to podcasting. Huh?
Yeah, so we have Steven Bartlett from Darien CEO. Yeah, really excited.
Right, tell us, how do you get him now? Do you? Is that a LinkedIn job that we go to?
Well, it was.
Is it about connections or?
Well, it was. So you go back to LinkedIn, you go back to Psyche. So you can imagine I have 3 teenagers. I have my kids polluted with all of this stuff. They go, "Oh, Daddy, don't go on again." So I had already 7 speakers confirmed. Damien Hughes of the High Performance Podcast, another one of those. Nick Bradley, Kingsley Aikens, Nino Murrayhugh, Margot Hoig from Holland. These are world-class people. And my daughter Cara said to me, "Dad, have you confirmed your speakers for the podcast or for the summit?" And I said, "Yeah, I have." And she looked down the list. She goes, "Dad, would you not invite Steven Bartlett to the summit?" I said, "Well, Cara, I'm not sure Steven would come to the summit." She says,
"What kind of mindset is that for you?"
Very good growth mindset. And I said, "You're absolutely right." I went straight upstairs. I had connected to Steven Bartlett's executive assistant 18 months previous. He had called Sophie Chapman out for exceptional performance. And I seen this on LinkedIn. I connected with Sophie to congratulate her on the fact that she was doing such an amazing job. I had an executive assistant in my previous role. I know the role they play. They're just absolutely invaluable. So I connected with her. She came back and said, "Thank you so much." She connected with me on LinkedIn, so I had that connection. So I sent her a message to outline what we were doing, to inspire her. I got nothing. It was crickets for 2 weeks, and all of a sudden I was in Croatia, got a message to say, "We've had a discussion internally, we're keen to learn more. Can you send more information to the commercial team?" So she gave me then a contact email address, and I sent more information, got nothing for 2 weeks, crickets. And then she came back and said, "We've had a deeper conversation with Steven and he'd be delighted to support this. This is very aligned to what we're trying to do." And as it turns out, and this is back to the universe will conspire to support you when you take action, he's in Dublin on the afternoon of the 15th of November. She said the only slot he can do is 10 o'clock in the morning. The only slot we had left to fill was...
That's the universe aligning there. As he was like, well, I'm sure you would have, I'm sure we could have sorted something out for him.
Absolutely. Sorry, we don't have any 10 o'clock slots left. Yeah. So...
But it just shows you, though, that limiting belief that it's never going to happen will hold you back, because you took the action that when your daughter said it.
Well, she told the mirror to back to me. So, well, you're always you're preaching this. So, she had turned the mirror on me, and rightly so, because I hadn't asked the question. Why? I had already determined that Steven Bartlett wouldn't attend the summit. I already had my mind made up with that before I had even asked the question.
Oh my goodness. I admire it. I am in awe of it. I want to be like that now. And I think people that are listening are going to realise that we can have the dreams, and it's natural to have the dreams, but they're not going to happen unless we do something about it. Brendan?
Absolutely.
Whether it's buying the book, whether it's listening to another podcast, whatever it is, we need to take action or it's not going to happen.
Absolutely. Back to your psyche, I would invite people if if they listen to the news in the mornings, test 2 weeks of not listening to the news, but listen to your podcast, listen to my podcast, listen to another podcast. I listen to lots of different podcasts. This is what inspired me to create the podcast as well. I love podcasts. The value that you can get from podcasts is just incredible. From world-class authorities on all sorts of topics who are giving this value for free. It's just incredible. So the news will never change. The news you're listening to now will be the same news in 5 years' time, the same news in 10 years' time, the same news in 20 years' time. If you're waiting for good news to be reported, it's not going to happen. So why not fill your mind? I interviewed Chris Voss, the FBI negotiator, and he said having a healthy mindset for him was critical for him to lead some of the toughest hostage negotiations across the world. And he said, we're so caught up in our dental hygiene, we never forget to clean our teeth in the morning, in the evening. He says, what are we doing for our mental hygiene? So that really resonated with me. So I would invite people to just test it. This isn't something you've got to do and say, well, I'm not never listening to the news. Test it for 2 weeks, and rather than listen to the news, listen to a podcast, read a book. Just take 5 minutes. Get up 5 minutes earlier and read a book for 5 minutes. There might be something in that book that will inspire an action today that creates a trajectory for the future that you couldn't have ever envisaged.
Imagine the amount of people that are going to maybe listen to this podcast in the morning now instead of the news and hear you say that and then realise they need to take action. It's just like a ripple effect, and that's what we're talking about. Taking action will create that. I did a podcast with a career psychologist recently. Might be an interesting one. Is a girl called Sinead Brady from down south, but she said she encouraged me because I had a very bad habit of lifting my phone the minute I wake up and with blue light going in and consuming all of that. And it wasn't to look at the newsfeed, it was to check my emails and do all that. She said, get up and open your curtains and let the light in. And I'm not an airy-fairy person at all about things. I'm very practical, like what can I do to make things better? But I've been doing that now for the past month or so since I talked to her. I'm not saying there's groundbreaking changes, but I feel like a better person when my kids wake up because I'm not consumed by all the things that I have to do. Now I'm working on it. There's times it's like an addiction. I'm dying to grab it.
Yes.
But what's that going to do to me? Only make me a cross person when they're getting ready for school. I don't want to be that person. So I have to work hard at that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's so critical. Back to something that you said, which is so critically important, is I feel better as a result of doing this.
Yeah.
And all I ever say to people is test something different from what you're doing now and just check in. Do I feel better now, the same or worse?
Yeah.
And if you feel better and this action, which is opening the curtains, taking in sunlight, is constructive, then keep doing it. And life becomes a journey of continuing to do the things that are constructive that make you feel better. But nobody's going to come to you with this kind of a la carte menu saying, whenever you're ready, I've got all of this for you that's going to make you feel better. You've got to take that action yourself. So you could have chosen not to take any of that advice and go, that's
load of nonsense.
There is loads of research on that, by the way. And for anyone who's interested, Andrew Huberman's podcast, a wonderful podcast which gets into the science of early morning sunshine. I'm a big advocate, and there's actually a resource on our website called Win the Morning, Win the Day, that before so take the opening your email or opening Instagram or opening LinkedIn, for example, that's like letting hundreds and thousands of people into your bedroom before you've actually opened your eyes, before you've even got up out of the bed. You're letting thousands of people in, and we're human. We are going to react we're going to feel something as a result of reading an email, and maybe it's an email that's a pretty stinky email that's now going to determine your mood for the next 3 hours. Whenever Tess comes into the bedroom and says, morning mummy, and you've just read this email, your energy is going to be very different than if you've decided that I'm going to have a morning routine that's 30 minutes that is not looking at the phone, opening the curtains, taking in the sunlight, doing some stretching, reading something that I really love, taking some water, making a coffee, having a nice breakfast, whatever, time test comes to you, you're going to feel bloody great. Now I'm in a great place to actually start my day. And my mindset's in a great place to actually receive whatever is in the inbox.
I need to tell Jared this. He's ripping at me for opening the blinds every morning. What are you doing? That I'm like, Jared, I'm not in sunlight. And he's like, oh my God, she's reading the books again. But I need that. Jared doesn't have the life I have online. He's a welder. He gets up and goes to work. He does not have those thousands of people in his room every morning. I have a different life than him, and I explain that. And he gets it. I'm just having a joke, but he does laugh at me now. But I'm trying to do that. And
I'm not saying this as if I've this all.
No, I'm wondering about you. I'm like, I wonder what his life's like. I wonder, do you slip? Do you,
Of course. It's great for me to have these conversations because it reminds me of the things that I need to address. So I'm not pontificating from a place where, I've this all cracked.
Yeah.
It's great to articulate what I truly believe in because it actually highlights for me the things that I need to address.
Yes.
But the phone is one where I urge people not to start their day opening their inbox, opening Instagram, the role of the internet, the role of Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, whatever it is to keep you on Instagram, TikTok. It's so cleverly designed. It's curated by psychologists. There's an algorithm in there. They know exactly the amount of images to share with you. They know the length of time. They know they're feeding you, mind candy. There's no nourishment in it, and it's for them, not for you.
I know. Oh my God, it's soul destroying to hear it in that way. But you're right. You're right, and there is a place for it when we're ready as people to consume it. But 6 o'clock in the morning is not a good time for anyone to be consuming that.
No.
Well, I mean, my lifestyle, it's not good. Yeah. It molds me for the rest of the morning, and I don't want that.
Yeah, and it molds you for the rest of the morning. I love that. Ultimately, you want to mold the morning in a way that you want, not how somebody else is going to mold your morning for you. So that's analogous to win the morning, win the day. For me, once you have created a routine that works for you, or I have a routine that really works for me, and that leaves me in a place where I feel really, really ready to engage with the day. I don't feel the weight of things coming in on me.
I know. Well,
that can let them in.
I know, and it can get heavy. It can get too much, and then you feel like giving up. But we can't give up because we love what we do, and we're ambitious, and we've got purpose and vision. But it can get smothered by all of that, and we need to be very aware.
Absolutely, and you back to being self-aware. I find journaling is so powerful. It's always asking the question, does this serve me? Mm-hmm. In the context of the vision you've created for the future, because the vision, once you've crafted a vision for the future, that serves to inform everything that you should do, and it filters out all the things that you shouldn't.
Yeah.
So when you ask that question, does this serve the vision that I've set? Does this serve the person that I want to become? When you ask that question, then you can quickly rule it in or out.
Absolutely.
Now, it doesn't make it any easier if you then say, well, I have a habit of looking at my phone in the morning. What I would say, the habits are very difficult to change. Mm-hmm. So don't have the phone then at the bedside locker. The environment is so key. If somebody, you put it in another room, so that means then that you've now a habit, which means that when you're waking up habitually, you'll just reach over and grab the phone. That's something just instinctive. Mm-hmm. If the phone's not there, then you will replace that with something else.
Yeah.
It's the same as somebody wants to, eat more fruit. Well, put a bowl of fruit on the breakfast bar so that that's sitting there in the morning as opposed to the box of biscuits.
Yeah.
Do you change the environment? It's very, very hard to change a habit if you haven't changed the environment.
Take action.
That's it.
What it's down to. If there's people listening, and I'm sure there are hundreds and hundreds listening that would love to be part of ScaleX Summit. You've done something really good for us, which I really, really appreciate. there's a discount code where people can actually get some discount off to attend. Isn't that right?
Absolutely.
Do you remember what that is? I know your team was
ScaleX Dig, but I'll send that.
Yes, I got to put it in the show notes for anybody.
% discount for anyone who has listened to the podcast who enters the code
and would like to be part of that movement. And it definitely is. And you know, I didn't really realise, Brendan, the podcast was going to be so emotional. I feel like I feel like, you know, it's just so much resonated with me, and I hope that everyone else is feeling that too in a positive way that are listening, that they can make change. It's not like we're in control now from this moment forward. We can make change now.
Absolutely.
And there's different ways we can do that. You know, and we've covered some of it, but there's so much more. Brendan, maybe you'll come back again, maybe in a year's time, and maybe I'll have sorted some stuff out. You know, stop trying to turn the trousers up myself. I don't do that anymore because I don't have a clothes shop, but I'm still doing tasks that would mimic that within my own business that I do now.
So I would challenge you, every time you're doing a task, ask, is this turning the trousers up? Yeah.
There you go. There's the analogy I need.
Cut out the turning up the trousers.
Yeah, that's the one that'll bring me back to basics for sure. Thank you so much for being. When I sent the message on LinkedIn, I had your daughter said to you, and then I was like, oh God, he'll never say yes because he's got this big podcast with these big guests. So I don't take for granted that you agreed to be here, and never thought you would. So thank you for just being like the rest of us and wanting to inspire and lead and encourage. And I can't wait to continue to follow you. And I will be at ScaleX Summit, and I'm sure I've got a few people behind the camera that's going to be joining me, and we'll make a day of it. So thank you for all that you do to help businesses out there as well.
All right, back at you. I love what you're doing. It's brilliant. From the early stages, I remember my kids a number of years ago saying, oh, look at this girl, she's in her car and she's going into this business and she's talking all about this business, and you know, and I would imagine that was challenging for you in those early stages, and I would imagine also that you were getting a lot of comments back to say as to why the hell are you doing that? Why are you putting your life on camera? I'd imagine there was a lot of that.
Oh, absolutely.
And for you to move through that is really powerful. I know you do an amazing job on behalf of lots of charities. It's incredible. What you're doing on the podcast is brilliant. A lot of people I speak to are inspired by what you're doing. So,
well, God, thank you. So, oh my God, it is. Thank you so much. Because sometimes, you know, like online isn't an easy world to be in the world of work. But as you say, I have a purpose and I know why I'm doing it. You do get distracted by the noise of people saying with negativity and their thoughts on you. Again, I just keep saying, why am I doing this? But it's a work in progress, Brendan. It doesn't be easy sometimes, but I know why, and I'll continue to do it. And they can just, you know, people will always talk, and I need to just learn coping mechanisms. So thank God for people like you to help me. So yes, thanks for being on the podcast, and we'll see you in November at the ScaleX Summit.
Brilliant. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on, Carmen.